A precarious moment indeed, Jordana, and the risk of a strike comes, of course, as the war in Gaza is raging on. Now, efforts are underway to secure a ceasefire, end the bombardment of Gaza and free those Israeli hostages. Now, families of the hostages have been speaking to the press. Let's have a listen to a little of what some of them have had to say recently.
6 months have passed, 6 months of them being there in hell. It can't be that they are going through hell just in order to be murdered in captivity. There has to be hope. We have to free them now.
None of the hostages are safe. All those that are alive are in constant danger. They have no time.
Jordana, talk to us then about the efforts to free those hostages and the sticking points for the negotiators right now.
Look, your heart has to go out to the Israeli families. I mean, 129 Israelis held in captivity for over 6 months. Israel knows that at least around 30 of them are already dead. The U.S. is estimating that number could be twice as high, that perhaps half of the hostages are now dead. And they are being subjected, we know, to all kinds of torture and abuse, given what we've heard now from those hostages who came out. These talks we're in the middle of another round, and the sticking points remain the same ones that have been there with us from the beginning. Remember, Hamas, their aim is to stay in power and not relinquish control of the Gaza Strip, to keep governing and survive this war. So they are demanding that any deal be the actual end of the war. And despite the destruction, despite the terrible and tragic death toll, Hamas is actually still in a relatively good position. They're holding all those hostages. Their leaders are alive. They have managed to stave off an assault on Rafah. And the world is on their side in terms of the humanitarian crisis and getting aid in without Hamas having to do anything. We're seeing more and more aid getting in. So, it is Hamas, again, wants the end of the war, and Israel only wants to pause it. Then there's issues of the redeployment of Israeli soldiers. There's only a few thousand left, but Hamas wants none of them on a corridor that splits Gaza into two. They don't want any checks, security checks, or any restrictions on movement from Gazans in the south coming back to the north. And that's another issue. How many and who will be allowed to come back to the north, right? Israel, of course, doesn't want men of fighting age to come back to the north, where they could regroup and rebuild and basically put back together the Hamas battalions that were dismantled by Israel over these last several months of fighting. And then, of course, the issue of how many Palestinians that are jailed here in Israel will be freed for each hostage, and how many will be those that are convicted of murder. And now there's new questions also about how many hostages Hamas can actually provide and free, since we're hearing credible reports that Hamas may not have enough 40 hostages that would fit the criteria for the first group to get out. That is, women, the elderly, and the injured and sick.